Well, thank you, music team. Uh, okay, everybody at home, virtual hug. Good morning. I came across this quote yesterday. Got one of those page-a-day calendars. And I thought I'd never heard it before, but I thought it was nice. It says, the month of May. May, more than any other month of the year, wants us to feel the most alive. And it's from Fennel Hudson, who I've never heard of before and couldn't find on Wikipedia. But it is springtime, and young man's thoughts turn to love. As I mentioned, Carl and I celebrated our 31st anniversary, and after spending last month on how to live a recession-proof life, and before that I did a prosperity series, I wanted to turn to relationships, and that's because Silent Unity is our 24-hour 7-day-a-week prayer line, although I say that, but now I know that they're closing from midnight to like 5 in the morning because of the coronavirus. But it's the phone number is 1-800-NOW-PRAY, and they also have silentunity.org. You can email a prayer request, and then of course we've got the app, You Pray, the letter You Pray. But over the years, they've tracked what kind of prayer requests they've gotten, since back in the 1890s, and there's the top three always are pretty consistent. It's healing, prosperity, and relationships. So I wanted to dive into relationships a little bit more, and of course you've got different kinds of relationships. You've got the romantic relationship, you've got family relationships, you've got coworker relationship, friends, neighbors, and that sort of thing. The title of today's, though, is Are You the Right One? Because that always seems to be a big question, is, how do I know that I found that right one for that one special relationship? I got a list here of some pickup lines that were submitted by some women as far as what were of course, the old classic, meeting someone for the first time, can you come up with a creative pickup line? The first one is, I lost my phone number. May I have yours? Did it hurt when you fell from heaven because you look like an angel? Third one is, your legs must be tired because you've been running through my mind all day. And then this fourth one I got a kick out of. It's, I'm hoping you can help me with directions. To where? To your heart. Some of the ideas I'm going to share today on relationships came from a minister up in Atlanta, Andy Stanley. One of the challenges we have in looking for a truly intimate relationship is that there's this stereotype that's been perpetuated by our society, and that is that there's that one perfect person. And of course, if someone's single, they're like, well, once I find that one perfect person, everything will be great. I remember hearing a psychologist talking about 30 years ago. He says, people talk about soulmates. He says, but when we examine personality types and all that, he says, I'd estimate that you maybe have 50,000 soulmates out there in the world. But what we do, of course, is we follow our intuition to find that one that's the right and perfect partner for us to at least proceed with. And like so many things, I know, especially for us baby boomers, we see whether it's in work, we end up having to change workplaces over time, and there have been, of course, a number of people that have had to change relationships, whether it's by being widowed or just having a divorce or a breakup. But yeah, there's this one right person meme that we have. Once we find that one right person, we'll be happy. And of course, it's the romantic comedies and all that, reinforce that. Fairy tales, you'll live happily ever after. But the challenge is that we feel that the thing that's going to make everything different is outside of us. All we need to do is connect with that one special person. So you'll have a person say, well, I've been so undisciplined, but once I meet that one right person, I suddenly will find discipline. Or I've always been bad with money or in debt. Once I find that right person, that'll all end. I've been depressed or moody, but once I discover that right person, everything will be happy. I've never truly been able to hold down a job, but once I find that right person, and I've had addictions, but I've never gotten along with my parents, so once I find that right person, I won't have to see them anymore. It's like, no, none of that stuff works. So how do we know when we found the right person? Like I said, it's more intuition. Of course, chemistry is the common way a lot of people say it. And, we have that feeling, especially early on, like, oh, nobody's ever felt this kind of passion and love for each other because everything seems to be great. But then we start to notice flaws in that other person. I know that some of you are searching for that right person. What are the qualities you're looking for? I was part of a relationship workshop where they kind of put it out there to single people. And they say, what, as a single person, are you looking for? And the list of people, shouted out were like kindness, trust, integrity, respect, love, humorous, fun, stable, healthy, good-looking, money, and the pièce de résistance, single. Now, the interesting thing is that single people come up with this list of what they're looking for, but then people who've been married before have a slightly different list. And sometimes you may overcorrect for the unpleasant aspects of that former partner. But as we come up with our list, one thing that most of us have not done is decided, okay, this is the person I'm looking for. Now, when I meet this person, would I be the kind of person that person's looking for? Rather than looking for, say, Ms. Right, am I Mr. Right? The mistake a lot of people make, especially when we're younger, in our teens, early 20s, is that sense that we try to be what the other person wants or what we think the other person wants us to be. And we kind of twist ourselves into a pretzel rather than expressing who we truly are. We don't need to be more spiritual. We're already spiritual beings having a human experience. So we each, though, have a personality that we filter, this God presence through. And, yeah, we have flaws. Doesn't mean we're not lovable. In fact, sometimes it's those flaws that can be the most endearing over time. And, of course, there's the old adage of sometimes a woman spends years planning her wedding but has given no thought to the marriage, just looking for that right person to plug into this dream they have of their Cinderella day. So let's look at the qualities that you're asking of others, and do you feel worthy of having someone like that? If you're a recovering perfectionist like me, I felt very unworthy, and that's really led in many ways to me divorcing my first wife. I did not feel worthy of her. I felt judged by her. And, when I met Carla, in those early months, it's kind of like, wow, this is a wonderful woman. Do I really feel worthy of it? And a lot of people will, if they're not feeling worthy of it, will sabotage, that relationship so that they can be the first one to walk away from it. They're afraid that the other person is going to leave them or whatever. So if that's going to be the inevitable outcome, the person thinks, I'll just end it now and deal with the pain now rather than later. So it is wise for us to become, as I said before, Mr. Right or Ms. Right. Being willing to look at ourselves, usually with the help of others. It might not be a bad idea to talk to a therapist or read a book on good relationships. I know here in Unity, we did a series on the book Eye of the Storm by Gary Simmons. It's I as in the letter I of the storm. About just how do we relate with each other? And are we truly expressing who we want to be? There's the law of attraction in Unity we talk about. Like attracts like. Life or let's say like begets like. So, how do I know I'm behaving in accordance with who I truly am? There's a Bible passage I want to go through. Some of you have probably heard it before, mostly at weddings usually, but I posted it on the Facebook page. And it's, I'm going to have Duncan put the slide up here. It's the first letter to the Corinthians. It's written by Paul, so it's in the section of the letters right after the Gospels. And it's chapter 13, starting with the 4th verse. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love is not envious, boastful, arrogant, or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, and endures all things. Like I said, I know that a lot of weddings that this reading is done. But rather than thinking of love as being something apart from ourselves, why don't we look at this as a guidebook on how to have healthy relationships, whether intimate or not. Love is patient. Okay. Are we patient with other people? Or are we always imposing our preferences on how they should behave? Can we trust that they are walking the spiritual path at their own pace? I remember I had a classmate in seminary, along with Carla as one of my classmates, but this was this other woman too. She was involved in unity and really spiritually growing, and her husband was just always poo-pooing it. Of course, a lot of people have their religion abuse stories and all that, so they think unity is just like all these other places. So she's coming to unity, and finally they started to grow apart, and they actually separated. But it was kind of a wake-up call to him, so he started to come check the place out. And he's like, oh, well, this is much different. And so they got back together again, and he ended up, being on, once they did graduate and was serving at a church, he became the music director for her, and kind of led the music team. So a lot of times just being ourselves shines the light for other people to kind of awaken to their own divinity. Carla, I know in the early years of our relationship, I was such a mess there at the beginning, sabotaging things a little bit at the beginning of the relationship. But then suddenly it's like, no, wait a minute. This is a wonderful woman, a woman I want to be with. And so, I started, to read some books that people recommended on relationships. I went to a therapist to kind of work all of these things out. Early on, just, once a week, and then eventually after 3 years, I got the stamp of approval that I do have the social tools now to handle the things that were happening. I also knew another woman who was having challenges in her intimate relationships, but then she, in therapy, realized that she had been molested when she was a kid. So that's going to set up an attitude of total distrust as you're going into a relationship. So love is patient. Love is kind. Do you treat someone kindly? And of course it says, honor and respect. Do you treat other people with respect, whether they're your coworkers, whether your family, whether your intimate relationship? How do we treat someone? Some of you know the actress Jane Seymour. Back in 1986, she wrote a book, Jane Seymour's Guide to Romantic Living. And she said, I'm always amazed when I see someone, they're having trouble with their relationship, so they'll have an affair. She said, think about all of the time, the effort, the energy you're putting into the affair. Now, if you're having a problem with your relationship, what if you were to take that attitude of an affair and have an affair with your spouse? Suddenly you're acting romantic again. You're looking for the best in the other person. She says that you just it radically shifts. If you're having problems, it's like, whoa, wait a minute, step back and say, okay, what is it right now that I'm discontented about? And am I willing to talk about it with that other person and see if we can come to an understanding of how we're going to move forward in this relationship? Going back to the Bible passage, love is not envious, boastful, or arrogant. Of course, there's the classic story, the star is born kind of a thing, where suddenly the woman's outshining, the man in a relationship, and the man taking it, so personally and feeling unworthy and angry. Or say you're in a relationship and the other person is telling a story, or talking about an accomplishment. Can you just honor and respect and allow that person to let the light shine on her? And I know when I was younger, feeling more unworthy, someone would tell a story about, an achievement or something like that, and suddenly you get into the game of, can you top this? He goes, oh, yeah, well, I had a similar experience, blah, 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 to try to, prove to myself that I was worthy of being with this person, or showing this person that I was just as good as they were. Do we insist on our own way? Like I said, there are preferences. Do we behave, do we expect everyone else to live their lives according to our preferences? In the Bible verse it says, irritable or resentful, does not rejoice in wrongdoing, rejoices in the truth. Some of you who are fans of the TV show Seinfeld may remember episode number 22 in the 5th season. No, you don't remember that? It was the last episode, but it was the opposite. Of course, you've got the 4 characters. You've got Jerry, who's kind of that center of reason around which George, who's the intellectual, always trying to overthink things. And then you had Elaine, who was the more emotional one. And then you had Kramer, who was the one who was just always in touch with the latest trend in the physical world. George, at this point, realizes his life is an absolute mess and comes to the conclusion that he needs to do the opposite of what he thinks he should do. And he starts to, so every time he has this sense of, okay, this is what I think I should do, he'd do the opposite. And by the end of the episode, he has found a job with the New York Yankees management office. He's found a beautiful girlfriend, and so by the end of the episode, it's kind of like, just by sometimes looking at, why am I making these decisions? And doing the opposite, he comes out smelling like a rose at the end. Love endures all things. One of the things I've noticed, especially in working on our relationship with Carla, is, am I doing what I can to bring out the best in the other person? I remember hearing Marianne Williamson in a talk back, good 20, 30 years ago, talking about when you're truly committed to a relationship, you've committed to the fact that you're not going to walk out of the argument. That you're willing to sit and discuss it. And if you can't quite come to an agreement, know that, okay, you're not leaving. You're going to come back the next day and try it again. I'm not saying that you should be a doormat. I mean, you should express your preferences, but you can't lay your preferences on other people. You can feel guilt, but you can't lay guilt trips on other people. I'm not asking you to change who you are, but being willing to express who you truly are and be the best you that you can be. Our closing, and I usually do takeaways at this point, but the takeaways is this passage from the first letter to the Corinthians. So we're going to, our closing story is a video from Steve Hartman of the CBS Evening News.
Lori Agan of Bowling Green, Ohio, is about to marry her soulmate.